session, Dropship EDI for Dynamics AX 365 and NAV, Designing a Smart Integration. So our two presenters today are Ivy Davis and George Delp, who are both from DI Central, and we're very happy to have both of them here with us today. So before we get started, just want to quickly note you can submit any questions you have during the session through the Q&A box on the right side of your screen, and Ivy and George will try to get to all of them at the end of the event. And actually, before we start, we have a quick poll question for you. So I'm actually going to get that launched right now. And while I am doing that, I'm going to pass it over to Ivy.
Thanks, Adam. We're happy to be here today and excited to put this webinar on for everyone about Dropship and integration with EDI and Dynamics. So I'll give you a few minutes to take the poll question so we have a better idea of who we're talking to today, and you know, it'll give us a little bit more focus on where we need to be with answering your questions and what we're presenting. All right. Are you on the buy side or the supply side? So buy, supply, or if you're a 3PL, can answer that way. You can go ahead and close it out and we can kick off the presentation, Adam.
Cool. Yep. It's just going to finish closing out in about 15 seconds.
Oh, perfect. I didn't know if there was an automatic closeout on it.
No. You have to do it manually, unfortunately.
Right.
Okay. Would you like me to read the answers?
Yes, I would love to hear who we have on the phone today.
Okay, so about a quarter of participants are on the buy side. About 20% are on the supply side. It doesn't seem like we have any 3PL providers here. And then there are a bunch of people that didn't answer.
Guys, are y'all sleeping on me? Come on. I've got some coffee here for you. A little Starbucks Blonde Espresso. Well, maybe we'll have better luck with the next poll. Let's kick this off, and hopefully I can wake you guys up. A little, I want to say osmosis, but via the phone. So let's get this kicked off and talk about the agenda today. We're warming up with Dropship, and then we're going to rev up your ERP with EDI integration, and then finally cross the finish line with a scalable Dropship implementation. So you'll notice these are all kind of car metaphors. I know my first one I went through was kind of Dropship, are you in the race? So you're going to hear a lot of that today, plus my husband and I are car fanatics, so it just kind of goes hand in hand. Let's get started with, thanks to Adam for already introducing us, by the way. So I'm Ivy Davis, Product Marketing Manager here at DI Central. We've got George on the phone as well. George?
Hey, good afternoon or morning, everybody, as appropriate. Great to be here.
All right. So just a few numbers that I like to share to always kick it off, and just to put things into perspective about the market as it is today. Here at DI Central, we do a lot of studies with different universities that work in supply chains. So it's really cool to partner with them and get these statistics and have them do the studies for us. 96% of America has made an online purchase. That number doesn't startle me at all. $220 billion is the size of the retail e-commerce market just in the U.S. alone. So 51% of Americans prefer to shop online. So that number does surprise me as a little low. I've got 2 kids. I know I do everything online just to avoid taking them into the store. I usually spend double if I do. All right, so Adam, this is kind of your cue. Let's kick off another poll question, and hopefully we can kind of keep the momentum here and get some answers on, you know, what is your current dropship plan? You know, are you just researching? Have you been strategizing an implementation and kind of what that's going to look like? Are you already to an integration piece where you want to integrate, you know, Dynamics, whether it be NAV, AX, whatever your platform is, and you're looking to kind of get that together with EDI? So I will give you some time to answer that. Oh.
Looks like I launched the wrong poll got launched. We gave you we launched the EDI provider benefits poll.
Oh, cool. Do we want to roll with it?
I think we might have to. Okay.
Let's totally go with it. I'm okay with that.
Okay.
So,
okay.
I'll just read the question, and when we get to that slide, we can skip it. So, does your EDI provider give you these benefits? So, time to acknowledgement order, order fulfillment rates, item setup and inventory metrics, and shipping fulfillment timeframes. So this actually is one of the questions that is going to be presented later by George, as he's going to be talking about some of these. So it would be in your interest to kind of answer this and give him the information on, you know, what are you looking for, where do you stand, and where are some of your challenges, so that he can speak to that. It could potentially work out, Adam, that we just launched the wrong poll. Give George a little bit more time to prepare so he's not whipped off his feet. All right. Do we want to close out the poll?
Yeah, well, there's still some people taking it. Yeah, we'll wait like a minute. Yeah. Cool.
Well, I'm happy that they're still taking it. In the meantime, guys, we will we can go ahead and ask the other poll question if we want.
Yeah, I can launch that too.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
I have to actually wait. So let me close this one out.
Okay.
I'll close this one out. It'll close in a few seconds, and then I will launch the other one.
This is going to be the most interactive webinar that anybody has ever been on.
Yeah.
Let's see, and then it says the poll ended. So I'm going to go ahead.
I'm going to open the other one. There we go.
Great, and we will share the results with you when we're done pop quizzing and interrogating you. So the poll question that he just launched is the original one. What is your current dropship plan? So are you just researching, strategizing, and implementation, or looking to integrate with Microsoft Dynamics and kind of EDI, get those platforms talking to each other? This is great. Adam, how long do you want to give this one to stay up before we kick it off? I know people some of them are in their lunch hours, so they may not be willing to hang tight with us.
I know that people, you know, have a sandwich in one hand and they're trying to answer the poll with the other hand, so. But we'll give people just another few seconds to collect their thoughts.
That's perfect. I know I'm still drinking my morning coffee. I don't have any food in my hand yet. Despite that I was up with George. All right.
Oh, I'm going to close out that poll.
Perfect. Can you share the results with us?
Yeah. All right. So for the first one, does your EDI provider give you these benefits? So time to acknowledgement order, we had 21% of people select that. 11% selected order fulfillment rate. 16% selected item setup and inventory metrics, and 16% also selected shipping fulfillment time frames. And then for the other poll that we just ran, so what is your current drop ship plan? 32% said just researching, 11% said putting together an implementation, 21% said looking to integrate with Dynamics. So interesting results.
Good to know. Thanks, guys, for hanging in there with us while we went through that. So kicking off, the drop shipping process. I do a lot of introductions to dropship when I do these webinars and host these at DI Central. I want to keep the introduction brief, but I did want to give you a graph, kind of look. You're going through the purchase. So the customer makes an order online. Example, I order my girls' gymnastics uniform. The order confirmation comes from the retailer. And then you go into order routing, your vendor acknowledgement, shipment confirmation, your ASN, actually, oh, excuse me. You can see I can't count this morning. Let's go purchase, order confirmation, order routing, vendor acknowledgement, to your branded packing slips, fulfillment, ASN, shipment confirmation, invoice, and receipt. So what's important here is to also keep in mind these inventory updates. So for drop shipping, there's some challenges that we'll talk about in a few minutes that you're going to run into, that you need to make sure that your inventory is up to date through this entire process. And you're also going to take note that these exchanges and these arrows through this process, there's documents that need to be communicated to each other, and you can't do that with just an ERP system. It's essential to have EDI integrated in there. So moving on to the next slide is kind of what to expect when you're implementing Dropship. So first of all, you're going to see an increase in orders, increase in paperwork, and amplified demands. The increase in orders is because you're now going from bulk fulfillment to, shipping 1 or 2 pieces at a time. So the demand is different, and you're shipping directly to the consumer. So there's a need for faster, more accurate processing, and that also includes the small partial shipping integration piece of it. When you're talking faster and more accurate, and then you amplify that with the forecast for order demand. A lot of suppliers are typically used to that bulk fulfillment where it's scheduled. You've got the truck that backs up, they're coming Monday afternoon at 2, and you're going to load it up. That's not how Dropship works, right? You've got me, the customer, ordering my girls' gymnastics suits at like 10 o'clock at night because I forgot, and they've got lessons in 2 days. And then what happens is, well, the inventory wasn't up to date, so I ended up getting one 2 days later and the other one 4 days later, which when you have a toddler is a pretty big issue. So keeping that inventory up to date and forecasting those demands can be difficult if you're trying to do that with a manual process. So you're looking at, when you're talking about cars, it's great. You're driving a manual rather than an automatic, that's perfect. It's a thrill. However, when you're talking about EDI and your business, you may not want that thrill in your life, right? Like, you need it to be smooth between gears. You've got to consider the processing time. You've got to consider order mapping. You've got to consider data exchange. Not to mention, how long does it take you to upload a new connection or maintain an old connection? All of these things can bog down your actual focus, which is order fulfillment. So when you're utilizing a partner such as DI Central, we can take care of a lot of that burden with requirements, the sequencing of the documents, the data exchange, so that you can focus on, getting those orders out the door. Here's a little scare tactic for you. I thought it was more funny than anything. I think everybody knows what happens if you don't integrate. I think some of you are probably living that current scenario, which may be why you're on here today. Some of you may be in the process of just researching, but like, if you haven't integrated, you've got all that excess paperwork. You're working out of Excel, you're trying to track things. It can be very cumbersome. You've got the time consumption. It just takes a lot of time, a lot of man hours, and more overhead to go through those processes than it would for the technology. So you really need to figure out where your break even is so that you can integrate some of that technology and realize that your people can be doing something that's more valuable. So the biggest thing that we run into right here is it's going to be mistakes, right? I put mistakes instead of errors because you're like, errors are big, we're getting a charge back, et cetera. Those happen too, but mistakes happen with your consumers and people that are buying your product, essentially. And overall, what we're really trying to do is keep that customer promise. So we want to make our customers happy. We want to keep that guarantee. This is a chalkboard 5-star, but as most of you know, it's not on chalkboard. I can Google you on my phone, and as consumers, most people do this, right? Like, what are they rated? Did they get their order on time? Everybody's judged by, some type of platform and what somebody says about them, and it's all about that customer service and being able to keep them happy. So, and ultimately, the easier the processes are and the more seamless they are, you'll be able to do that and focus on the customer and what you're doing. So hopefully that gave you guys enough energy to answer, oh wait, we're not doing this poll question. We already asked it. Do you want to repeat the results right here, Adam, just so we know what they are going into the next piece of the presentation?
Sure, yes. Let me see if I can do that. Okay. So 21% selected time to acknowledgement order, 11% selected order fulfillment rate, 16% selected item setup and inventory metrics, and 16% also selected shipping fulfillment timeframes.
Thanks, Adam. I appreciate it. I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to George Dell. George, you want to take it away? Hey, George, are you on mute?
I am on mute, but I'm not on mute anymore. Hey,
happy to
so I
have you.
assume you can hear me now. Thanks, Ivy. So I hope everyone enjoyed the first portion of this. What we're going to do next is dive a little deeper, talk specifically about some of the process flow details that you need to consider in a dropship scenario. We'll also discuss a little bit of some compliance and reporting issues, and then talk a little bit about the economics of dropship transactions compared to, traditional business transactions, and also, how this all fits in with Microsoft Dynamics. And my understanding is this is more of a NAV, AX, / 365 crowd, so we'll focus on that. So we have a nice little diagram here. What we're going to do first is we're going to walk through the transactions that you need to have enabled to do dropship. So all of these numbers, those represent EDI document types. And typically when you're doing a dropship scenario, you're going to be required to communicate via EDI with your trading partner. So let's take a look first at the purchase order. So the retailers send a purchase order to the suppliers. So that's called an 850, that's the EDI document type. And the way that works is both on the retailer side and the supplier side, there's going to be an ERP system of some kind. So that needs to be information from the ERP system is sent to the EDI provider, which then translates that and turns it into the EDI document, which then sends the EDI document back out. And then on the supplier side, that EDI document will be translated into, in this case, either NAV or the AX 365 language necessary so that that purchase order can be recorded and then fulfilled. So once we have the purchase order sent from our retailer through the cloud to the supplier, the next step is several more documents. And I'm not listing every document here. These are just some of the more common ones. But the first thing you might send is a purchase order acknowledgement. One of the things that Ivy mentioned earlier was the time to acknowledge orders. So this can be done. That's called an 855. And then after the pick, pack, and ship process, you'll typically send an 856, which basically tells the retailer that's what you're shipping, when it's going to be shipped, shipping information and whatnot, so that the retailer can then provide that information to their customer. There's other documents. Sometimes there's 860s and 865s, which are purchase order changes and purchase order change acknowledgments and such. But these we're showing here are more the standard set. And then finally is the 846. And this is really important. This is not necessarily a transaction, but it is a process whereby the supplier can update the retailer on the inventory items, such as pricing information and availability information. Exactly what is updated. You know, EDI documents, while they're standards, they are very flexible, and every trading partner often has different requirements that they want you to adhere to. So the 846 is an automated way to keep your retailer up to speed on what you have available. You know, retailers, the last thing they want to do is have inaccurate information. So a customer places an order for an item, they're all excited, I'm going to get it in 2 days, my 2-day shipping, but then that item's not in stock. So it's important that the suppliers provide and maintain accurate information with the retailers. Now,
like that
the next, yeah, exactly. Exactly, because you got some bad information there, and then you had to deal with the kiddos, which I do not envy you in that. Yep. A lot of times, you may or may not, but a lot of times suppliers might be using a third-party logistics provider, also called a public warehouse. In this case, you can communicate electronically to that public warehouse. So those two documents are called a 940 and a 945, and we're seeing a lot more requests for this kind of interaction over the past few years. So the 940 is the warehouse shipping order. That's basically where you as a supplier send an order out to the warehouse facility stating, okay, this is what we need to ship, this is who you need to ship it to, this is all the information for the label and whatnot, and then the 945 comes right back to you and when it's shipped so that you will know that the order has been fulfilled, and then you can close the loop with your retailer. Some other things that are important to consider, and we touched on this briefly, but you have to, as a supplier, or even the 3PL on your behalf, has to adhere to the retailer packaging and labeling requirements. So it might be, custom invoices and packing slips that are going to go in the documents, or even, custom packaging, labeling. So that's something that you need to consider when you're evaluating your dropship system and how you're going to handle that. Shipping system integration, like Russell mentioned, FedEx, UPS, USPS, because the volume can be a lot higher. You're definitely going to want integration in there. And that information then flows back into the retailer when you're doing the 856. Now, your current situation and systems determine how this is done. Some people just have an ERP system. They're just using the basics. Some people, and in this case, either the AX-based ERP or a NAV-based ERP. Some people may be using some of the warehouse management features capable in those systems, or they may have a standalone warehouse management system. Or sometimes people, I've seen quite a bit, especially on the NAV side, where people have just a shipping module and maybe some automated data collection, barcode scanners hooked up, just using the core NAV functionality. So how you're going to handle all this, it's different for everybody, but so it does depend on what you do have. Now, the transaction economics. So as we mentioned earlier, traditionally when you're doing purchase orders, you're purchasing potentially pallets worth of goods, so that transaction costs can be spread amongst lots of items. But dropship typically involves single orders. I just ordered some from Amazon the other day for $8.95. And that included shipping, and it was delivered to my door in 2 days. So that's a whole different scenario. The volume is a lot higher, but you're not going to be able to handle traditional pricing models, traditional EDI pricing models there. So that's something that you need to look at when you're evaluating dropship solutions. You don't want to get stuck with traditional pricing and high volume of orders. It'll kill you. So the transaction pricing has to make sense. And it can be frustrating, comparing apples to apples in this industry. There's, data metrics, data volume, there's transaction volume, there's flat fees. So it's something just you need to look out for so that you make a proper informed decision. So where Dynamics needs help. Now, AX and NAV and 365, none of those have the EDI built in. It's funny, GP doesn't, but the old SL or Solomon, it actually used to have a built-in EDI module, but that's kind of a thing of the past now. So where Dynamics needs help is facilitating the EDI transaction processing. So regardless of the Microsoft Dynamics platform, you're going to need something to facilitate those B2B communications and the translation to of your order documents, your invoice documents, your purchase order documents in your ERP to the EDI standards so that you can then communicate with your various trading partners. Now, there's two common approaches to do this. You can do it yourself, and I see companies do that. Perhaps they have large internal IT and development staffs, and they have the capability and resources to do that, and they like to be self-sufficient. But when if you're working with one trading partner, okay, that might work. If you're working with lots of trading partners, sometimes that can get, it could take a lot of time, full-time equivalent plus type of time. And, it's a lot to keep up with. So it's just a decision you need to make for yourself. The alternative is you use a managed service provider that does this stuff year in, year out. That's all they do. It's almost like outsourcing your EDI department. So that's something to consider is the approach that you want to take. A lot of times, the managed services providers, they can meet you in the middle. Maybe you do a little bit of it, and they just help you out. But that's something that you need to think about is how much do you want to do? How much do you want to outsource? There's something to be said for having experts do things. They're generally going to do things quicker as opposed to, I see it all the time, companies do it on themselves. They're posting questions on the forums and trying to figure things out. And it probably winds up taking a whole lot longer to get those new trading partners set up as a result. So we talked a little bit about, well, we mentioned we were going to talk about compliance and reporting. So what we've been talking about so far has really been the blocking and tackling aspects. You have to have the transaction flow work. There's no way around that. But there's some other things that you can add that can help you better run your business on top. And these are things to look for when you're looking at dropship solutions. And we're breaking it out into 4 categories here: business rule management, quarantine management, alert management, and reporting. So first off, let's talk about the business rule management. So basically, when you're dealing with automated systems in EDI, you don't want to mess things up because there's things called chargebacks and fines, and if you do things the wrong way, you're not in compliance with your trading partner rules, you have the potential for them to deduct little bits amount of money from the invoices that they're paying you. And those little bits can add up, particularly if something gets out of control and happens over and over and over. And remember, we're talking here with dropship, we're talking lots of transactions, not one transaction with lots of items, but lots of transactions, with potentially one item. So look for something that has, it's similar to a workflow engine, but an alert engine that can monitor things. Things like, a purchase order that's about to expire, for example. It happens. Things get lost. And you could set up a rule that if a purchase order has not been, fulfilled or an ASN created within 7 days of that PO expiry date, alert the warehouse manager. Maybe 2 days before the expiry date, alert the warehouse, the chief of operations or the director of operations. Elevate that notice based on who you need it to go to. And these things, it's pretty cool these days. You can have them go to your phone, but not everybody wants that because some people prefer just to have it on their work computer. So that's one example, or invalid or mismatched SKUs. Maybe product IDs change, and there'd be a compliance issue if you sent back a ship notice that didn't match the purchase order with the right SKU. Maybe there needs to be a change process done to make that match up, or get, agreement that you can do that. Or sending an invoice before you send an advanced ship notice. So those are all things, there's dozens of examples we could go through, but those are some quick examples of things you might want to track, alert. And then when we say quarantine management, what we mean by that, especially like if you're going to send out an invoice before a ship notice, you can quarantine that invoice and prevent it from being sent, fire off an alert that the ship notice hasn't been sent, and then you can go fix that and you can avoid potential non-compliance issue. Now, on the reporting side, that's also important. People talk about reporting, but oftentimes it's this thing, it sounds great up front, but they never follow through, but it's very important. So things in a dropship scenario that you might want to make sure you're monitoring, you want to, obviously, you're going to have your order quantities, your time to respond, when you're sending those purchase order acknowledgments. But some real particular important metrics might be things like fill rates and on-time deliveries. As a retailer, you're going to want to have a scorecard of all your vendors so you can see who's performing well and who's not. And as a vendor, you're going to want to monitor that so you can identify any potential troubling issues. And the longer you do it, you can start to identify trends and do trend lines and see, are you trending in the right direction, or is your fill rate decreasing? Or is that maybe indicative that you're having a supplier issue on your side? On-time deliveries, are you having some problems in the warehouse? You need to take a look at that. So all of these things are important, and these, in addition to the core transaction processing, I encourage you to look for capabilities like this when you're looking at a dropship solution. So a quick checklist for getting ahead. The first thing, understand your trading partner requirements. And usually what we find is the larger company is the one that's going to dictate the terms, and the smaller company is the one that has to do what the larger company wants. Oftentimes, it's the retailer that is dictating the terms to the suppliers. Although, of course, since I say that, I've had two situations this week where the suppliers are the ones dictating terms. They're unique situations, but usually it's the retailer. So you need to understand what they're asking you to do and what metrics you need to monitor in order to be compliant with them. Then the second thing, assess the capabilities of your current systems. Are you just using an ERP, AX NAV 365, or are you using a WMS shipping solution and whatnot? There's going to be lots of capabilities, and every situation is different. In NAV and AX, they're known for you can tweak them, customize them, and most people do. So it's hard to just say, oh yeah, I use NAV, I can do that or not. Every situation is different. But then once you have that, you're going to understand what you need to do, what you can do, then you can identify the gaps. And at that point, you can start looking for dropship and EDI providers and start doing research, things like watching these webinars. We have other webinars that get more detailed and actually, go into live demos and such. So, and consult with industry experts. The user group forums are great. Talk to other companies, find out, hey, when you're at trade shows, say, hey, what do you do for this? And that's a great way to start doing your research. So with this, I'm going to toss it back to Ivy.
Thank you, George. Appreciate your insight. I know day in and day out, every day you're doing dynamics, and I enjoy working with you on that. Thanks for doing the webinar with me. Just some final thoughts for our audience out there. Go ahead and send in your questions. George and I are hopefully ready, unless you're catching us off guard. So just a little summary of what we've talked about. Implementing dropship, it's going to provide a new revenue stream, right? Like, in dropship, e-commerce, it's the big thing in the market right now. It's what you see in the news. Everybody's talking about it. And every new thing comes with its challenges. The best advice that I can give, and just knowing kind of what I know from, speaking with everybody and doing these webinars, is technology can help you overcome those. It can, you have to consider EDI, and people on the phone are talking about dynamics. And these integrations and these communications, helping talk to people. Well, you can't work with your coworkers without communication and having meetings and knowing what they're doing. So how can you expect your systems to do the same? Thank you all for coming on. I'm looking forward to answering your questions. Feel free to schedule a follow-up with George Dope. I put his email here and his phone number. You can also reply to me as well. Reach out on LinkedIn. I've often posted stuff you may be interested in. So thanks, Adam. I'm going to hand it to you so you can give us your questions.
Perfect. Okay, let's see if we have any questions coming in. So here's one that just came in. How is the ship from address determined and managed in drop shipping?
Okay, yeah, I saw that come in. Actually, I first read it as how is the ship to address read, but that's what you get for reading too quick. Earlier, we talked about the importance of the labeling and packaging requirements. So that is based on I mean, there's going to be an address. Obviously, it's not necessarily going to be the retailer's address, but the packaging will need to reflect, you're going to have the purchase order come in. It's going to have the customer. That's going to be your customer, but you need to reflect the custom packaging and labeling to show the address, the information, et cetera, that you want to show on the shipment. Likewise, on the ship to, that would just come over as part of the purchase order data that's coming in. If that doesn't answer your question, we can, of course, follow up. Our contact information is here, so we can provide more detail, or you can type it here and now.
All right, let's see if we have any additional questions coming in. All right, here's one. How long does it take to implement a dropship solution?
That's a great question. I hate to say this. I mean, it really depends. At the base level, we're probably looking at 60 to 90 days, with maybe one or two trading partners. But if you're going to set up, we see situations where there's maybe, 30, 40, 50 trading partners to set up. That's obviously going to take a little bit longer. And we constantly get questions, why does it take so long? And the number one reason is testing. You have to test these transactions before you go live because they're automated. Once they go live, they're going to have it over and over and over. And sometimes a lot of companies will have testing windows. We only test the last week of every second month of the year. So that can also greatly affect timelines. But as a general rule, it's like take for each EDI document type, add a month, do a month, and then add a month on top of that. So 60 to 90 days to start, but it could definitely be longer, 6+ months, depending on your situation.
All right, here's an interesting question, kind of a long question. We use a unique concept for Dropship EDI, snacks, sun-dries, etc. Vendor sends EDI 855, which we reverse to a PO. The original PO is a blanket. Where does the reverse PO go in Microsoft Dynamics 365? Does it go to the direct deliver module? This person also said that he can he'll email you, George, some more specifics, but
yeah, that's a great
feedback. Yeah.
Yeah, that is. I would appreciate, Douglas, if you can email that to me. Just a little bit more about me. I know a whole heck of a lot about Solomon, GP, and NAV. I'm newer to the AX365 world, and I'd want to get with one of our implementation consultants to give you a proper answer to that. So if you can email that, I will make sure that we follow up and get you the information that you're looking for.
Thanks, Adam. Do we have any more coming in?
Yep. Looks like we have a couple more. All right, so someone's asking, why do I need EDI to do this? Can I just connect directly to my customer/retailer?
Yeah, I mean, we actually talked about that a little bit. You can. The question is, do you want to take that work on yourself? It's all very commonly discussed these days is, do you focus on your core business, or do you hire staff to do things that aren't your core business when you can just, outsource that to experts that are probably going to do things? And more importantly, experts, ideally good experts, will bring best practices to the table. They'll have been there, done that, bumped their head, stubbed their toe, and make sure that they can recommend ways that you don't experience those painful situations. So you can, but it's a whole lot of work, and it'll generally take longer too, because you have to figure it out as you go. A lot of learning, so those implementation timeframes would go out too. So technical answer, you can, but I don't know if I'd really recommend it.
Someone's asking if you support Dynamics 365.
So with 365, there's Business Central, which is the one based on NAV, and then there's Finance and Operations or Enterprise Edition, and we support both. And there's, both have great APIs that our EDI cloud can work with. So we support both today, as well as, we still talk to people that are running, customized versions of AX and, old NAV that they aren't ready for Business Essential. So the answer is yes.
Here's another interesting question. As a retailer, the physical ship to from address will need to be used to determine the tax to pass to the customer. How can a retailer know the ship from address if the items are being shipped from a supplier?
Okay, so good. That's a little more detail on that from that prior question. That all goes in. So we mentioned the EDI documents, and there's various standards. Now, those standards, while they're standards, each document is custom. Honestly, it's a little different for each one. So the mapping and the fields that you use, so that information would need to be sent back to the retailer as part of those documents that we looked in earlier. They're going to send you a purchase order with the information, and then, depending, and again, it depends. As a supplier, you may be just one single location or multiple location, but that information will need to be mapped into the information that's sent back to the retailer, and that would be part of the implementation process.
All right, here's another question. Microsoft has a digital vendor collaboration module in Dynamics 365. What benefit would we get integrating through EDI?
We go back to the requirements. If I'm not super familiar with that module myself, but if that met, when you go back to understanding what your trading partner requirements are, we need this information sent in this manner. If it can handle that, that might be an option. But oftentimes, especially on the retail side, they're already going to be set up with EDI and ask that their trading partners communicate via EDI specifications to them. So again, a lot of it is compliance and, what language or method. So the answer is it depends, it depends on the specific situation. It's hard to give a just general answer, this is better, because it's going to be different depending on what two businesses you're talking about.
And here's a more general question that came in. What's the typical return on investment for dropship?
Hey, George, I'll take that one on the dropship side.
All right.
So that is a very general question, but I can't answer that in two pieces. So first, you need to consider, what is the margin, going to take for single SKU fulfillment? And a bigger piece of that is the relationship with your customer, right? So is the customer asking you, I'm going to assume you're on the supply side, is the customer asking you, to do bulk fulfillment as well as dropship? So it's important to be able to keep that relationship for your bulk fulfillment, which you could potentially be making more money on and you're used to those processes, to keep them happy and to do dropship, which is, the single SKU fulfillment. So you need to take into consideration negotiating the contract. You're negotiating your transactions and the margin that it's going to take on your transactions and their relationship in general with the customer that you're trying to satisfy for dropship. What does that look like? Is there a bigger return there if you do this? So, also, sorry, that's three pieces. One more piece is that you can test these products, right? So if you are working with somebody who's, you're currently just going to drop ship something, but you're not doing bulk fulfillment with, it may be a good way to test some of your products online, and then if that product does well online, you may end up doing a bulk fulfillment, which additionally will bring you more revenue. So hope that answered the question.
See if we have any more questions that come in. We'll give people just another minute or so to collect their thoughts. But these are good questions so far, so keep them coming.
They must have put down their sandwiches for a few minutes to type it. I appreciate that, guys.
I think so.
Right about now, I'm craving one.
Hmm.
I'm going to go ahead and switch the slide on the presentation so that y'all have my information as well. I'm more on the dropship side of things, so if you have any questions on that, I can always direct you where you need to go with our team, or just in general answer any questions about dropship. So here's my email, idavis@dicentral.com. Please feel free to shoot me a message with any of your questions.
Yep. Oh, I'm sorry. We just have another question that just came in. Someone's asking, are there currently any tax solution providers that support DI Central?
Yeah, we work with Avalara, which a lot of the community, AX and NAV 365 should be familiar with. Avalara is a huge, big supporter of the Dynamics channel and products.
Adam, is there any more questions rolling in, or are we...
No, yeah, it looks like that's all the questions. But once again, if somebody has a question and they want to reach you offline, your email is right there, so they can just send it to you. But yeah, why don't we end it there? I'd like to thank Ivy and George for taking the time to present to everybody, and I'd like to thank everyone who participated for taking the time to join us today. So thanks so much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.